This is not financial advice, and nothing that you hear on this show should ever be misconstrued as financial advice. You guys hear that all the time. But today we have a special guest who is actually qualified to give financial advice. And that doesn't mean that today's show should be interpreted that way. It does mean that if you're looking for a professional, this might be the guy to get in touch with, because he's pro crypto, a certified CFP, and there are other fancy letters by your name, right, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I hate saying that I'm qualified to give advice, especially, coming from, the anarchist crypto world that we're in right now. But yeah, I have gone through all the government mandated stuff to be able to legally give advice. And I sort of blur the financial world with the traditional world with the crypto alternative world. But yeah.
Yep. Well, we're really excited to have you here today. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about is how people can assess their own risk tolerance, right? So that assessing someone's risk tolerance is something that you do when you manage people's financial assets. But what are some factors that people could look into to determine their own?
Yeah, and understanding how much risk you can actually handle is probably one of the more important aspects of the game, because unfortunately what ends up happening is people, everybody is willing to take on a lot of risk until, the bottom falls out, and then all of a sudden, they don't want to take on risk anymore. And that's why you see, like during this past, whatever round you want to call this, but this last financial crisis a few months ago, you saw Bitcoin go from, I forgot exactly where it was at, maybe like I think it went down to like 4,000 or maybe even lower than that. And that's because Bitcoin is a risk asset, crypto is a risk asset, and people sold off their risky assets at probably the worst time possible. And it was something that I did foresee and talked about at Anarchapulco February 11th on stage, saying that I thought that Bitcoin would go down 50 to 80% during those initial stages. And basically everybody laughed at me. So, I mean, I was in a room full of contrarians and having a contrarian opinion to them. But, it doesn't sell, clicks or newsletters to say, those opinions. But, you should really get a handle. Let's say if you have $100,000, what if you lost $50,000? Would you be crapping your pants? Would you have to sell? And you should really ask yourself, what limit, could you not bear anymore? Like seeing, and not that you should be, people, should really be taking a longer term view of this stuff anyways. And if you can't afford, and really, if something goes down a lot, and if your instinct isn't, oh, great, now I can go buy more of it, then you should really question whether or not you should even be in that in the first place. So for me, when Bitcoin goes down, it's like, okay, great, I can buy more of it. Now, if you need to sell it, that's another thing. And there should be, some diversification strategies, or maybe you have, either cash or gold or silver or something on the sidelines, so that way you don't need to tap into your crypto or tap into your more volatile assets. But I used to use a piece of software. You guys have, I don't use it. Actually, it's just funny. Just recently, I stopped using it because now everybody else uses it. But I was like way ahead of everybody else on this program called Riskalyze, where essentially what it does is it puts on a scale of 0 to 100 how much risk somebody can handle, and then you can then put in your portfolio to see how much risk is in it. Now, this doesn't really apply to the crypto world, but a crypto would obviously be like 100 on a scale of 0 to 100 of how risky it is. And what you see is, I would see a lot of people, like little old ladies, who be like, oh well, the numbers come back and says that, hey, we can only handle like a 25 on a scale of 0 to 100, which is not risky at all. And then I'd go look at their portfolios, and it was like an 87, and they're like, oh well, I'm just in these safe blue chip companies that can't go down. And a lot of people, and especially I started the day Lehman Brothers crashed, so I mean I'm very well aware that things go down much faster and then they go up. And there's also a lot of people out there who it's easy to be, risky when everything has been going up for 10 years straight. And I'm talking about like, if, for anyone, prior to, February, a lot of people are like, oh, well, yeah, I can handle a lot of risk. And then, everything goes down 40%. And all of a sudden, those people can't handle that much risk anymore that they originally told us to. And that's something I see, time and time again, over and over and over again. So you should really get a handle on, if you had $100,000 and it was down to $75,000, would you be able to handle that? If it was down for $75,000 for 6 months, could you handle that? And what they find is most people can only tolerate 6 months of what hitting the fan. At which point, if it's over that level, then they historically find that people would just sell their assets. And and a lot of people bought into Bitcoin at 20,000 and sold, probably at like 5 or sold at 8. And so if your first instinct isn't, I should go buy more of this when it goes down, then you should really question if you should even be in it in the first place, especially with something like crypto that's so volatile. I almost got more mad when it's going up, because it's like, oh wait, now when I put in a monthly buy, now I'm buying less of it. And so unless you actually need it, but you should have different buckets of money. Like, here's your bucket of money for short-term assets. Here's a bucket of money for longer-term assets. Maybe if I imagine this is probably a crypto show, but if you're, there's probably some crypto holdings that it'd be a good idea to you just hodl, maybe put in deep storage. Then you've got maybe some other assets that maybe you want to trade. Not financial advice, but I think it makes sense to have just different buckets of money. But just knowing what that tolerance is ahead of time, can pay huge dividends. And if you can't handle it, then then you're basically going to make all these other crypto whales rich when, they're laughing when, it tanks, and then they can come in and buy more of it. And we see this time and time again in the crypto space of people who are in it for all the wrong reasons. Prior to 2017, the people who were in it were, the hardcore libertarian crypto anarchists, people that were philosophically, against the big banks, against these institutions. And then a bunch of money comes into the space, and now all of a sudden it's, all the, Ripple fanboys and people who are, talking about how this can take over, we can have Ripple be the new financial system and all this other crap that's going on. And you see people that are in it because I'm like, well, what do you know about Bitcoin to, some of these people? And they're like, oh, well, it went up a lot in value, and that's why I want to get in. And they know nothing about basically anything. And a lot of those people got wrecked. And, I'm not shedding a tear for the people who got wrecked in the late 2017, who got into it and knew nothing about it. Because before I got into Bitcoin, I was, I could tell you at the time, I can't tell you now, but I could tell you what a Merkle root tree and all this other stuff was. And whereas other people are like, oh, I heard, from some guy down the street that I can make a bunch of money in it. And that's all I knew. And so if you're in it for the wrong reasons, you don't know, you haven't invested and taken the time to understand everything that there is to know about it, and you end up losing money in it, then that's your own education. That's your own could be an expensive lesson, or depending on how much money you put in, could be a cheap lesson. But it's a lesson, and people should just learn from those lessons.
It's awesome.
Within cryptocurrency, sorry, Seth, go ahead. So this show is actually going on a part of our show that's called Scambusters Saturdays. So we're actually talking about even higher risk factors within cryptocurrency, right? Like Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, those are already high risk assets. But what we're really wanting to gauge for our audience is how people can determine their risk tolerance if they want to participate in an ICO or an IEO, or something that is incredibly high risk, lower cap cryptos.
Yeah, and if we can, let's slow things down just a little bit for the audience, and let's jump back just a little bit so they can get a sense for your ideology. You made it pretty clear for the most part, Tim, that you understand crypto at a more fundamental level. You understand Bitcoin at a more fundamental level. Would you say for people that are just getting into crypto that it's important to start there? Do they need to become, to use the turn of phrase, do they need to become a race car mechanic to be comfortable stepping into the driver's seat of crypto?
I think it certainly helps. And given the state of where the world is today, I think a lot of the things that we talked about even like a year ago that sounded crazy, now all of a sudden don't really sound too crazy anymore, with being quarantined in their homes and all the other crap that they're pulling right now. But I think it's important to understand, that there's other use cases besides just the currency aspect of it. Right now, this is the first time we can have an immutable history where we can have things written down and know that they're not going to get changed. Because I don't really trust any of these ancient texts, and even not to probably offend some people, but even the Bible. How do we know that was really what was really written and wasn't changed? You look at the fake news that goes on today, and you're telling me that back then, when like 0.01% of people could read or write, that they weren't doing things to manipulate things or take entire books out, or
sure.
But now we have the ability to be able to know when things were changed, who changed them, why they were changed, and be able to have this record that is basically, set in the blockchain. And I think that that's very important, but it's important to understand that there's, these other use cases. I mean, I think the stock market is going to be on a blockchain probably, within the next 5 years. I mean, there's already, I think the Boston Stock Exchange was already implementing T0. I'm just using that for not investment advice, just naming that, because
you gotta be careful, man.
The SEC ends up watching this, and they're gonna.
People buy the rumors, right? They buy the rumors and they sell the news. So you got to be really careful on these shows.
Yeah. So I'm not, I'm making any advice. I'm just using that as something that's out there. But I think it is important to understand the philosophical underpinnings of why you should be in it. And if you're in it to make a bunch of money, that's great. But there's the big thing is this can be used to either free humanity or enslave humanity. And I've been talking a long time about there's going to be some FedReserve.gov coin where, and now they're even.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we
lost you, Tim.
Back now?
Yes.
We're back.
All right. All these damn lizard people. I was getting to the good part, and they wanted to cut me off right as it was getting good.
Always the lizards, right?
Yeah, I was saying, right, is how this could be used to either free humanity or to enslave humanity, and maybe that's the part they didn't like. But yeah, when it gets to the enslaving humanity part, I mean, what is eventually going to happen, and this is already literally in a bill right now in Congress, was Rashida Tlaib. That original $1,200 stimulus was in the initial text was supposed to be a U.S. digital dollar. Then you had the former, I believe it was the current office of the comp currency controller or whatever, the guy that's in charge of the currency, as of April 1st, was Coinbase's, I think, chief operating officer or chief legal officer, is now working at the Treasury and head of the currency. And the initial bill to get your $1,200 was actually supposed to be a digital dollar. They floated as a trial balloon, and now it's actually back where they're talking about giving everybody $2,000 a month universal basic income, and then that's going to be tied to a digital dollar. But don't worry, they're going to pay for it by printing two. I don't know if they print. They're going to make 2 separate $1 trillion platinum coins, and then the Fed's going to buy it from the Treasury, and then that's how they're going to fund everybody for the next 6 months. Everyone that makes under $99,000 a year. And that's actually a bill in Congress too right now. That's not even. Speculation.
So it sounds like what you're saying is, so all these crypto ICOs that say that they're gold backed or precious metal backed, you're saying that the federal government of the United States, working with the Fed, is proposing a similar ICO.
Well, it's not really an ICO, but I mean, that's how they want to. The next round of bailouts is one of the proposals that they're floating right now. But it's a trial balloon, so I don't know if they're ready to launch it now. But it's just a trial balloon to see what they can and can't get away with. But if you're on this control grid where they have your money that's centrally controlled, and then they can say, oh, well, you didn't get your coronavirus vaccine, so instead of getting $2,000 a month, you're going to get $1,500 or you're going to get $1,000, and it's probably not going to start off that way because they need to suck enough people into it, and then once they suck enough people into it, it's going to be that frog boiling where they use it to socially engineer, and it's probably going to have some sort of crypto that then gets tied back to, the Chinese social credit score. And I might be, talking over some people's heads with some of this stuff, but each one of these rabbit holes you could go down for, quite some time. But on the other hand,
for this audience, I don't think you are talking over theirs. I think you're very much speaking their language.
Yeah. And then you got something like Monero, which I see on your hat, which, that could be something freeing for humanity where they can't track, trace, or value, stop that. I mean, I guess, they can try, but, there's a lot of smart people in this industry that are already like 100 steps ahead of wherever the government's going to be in terms of what they want to do. But yeah, I mean, I think just knowing that this can be used everything is going to be digital eventually. I mean, it already basically is. So, you might as well be on the side of, freeing humanity and knowing what is actually up and not, trying to, help walk us into, further enslavement, which would probably actually be good for the price of Monero if, not financial advice, but if we have that control grid, because then people, especially if they ban it, then it's probably going to go up even more in value.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Tim, I'm sure you're aware with the crypto markets. with the crypto markets right now, I'm sure you're already aware that Zcash, even though it was well funded to begin with, even though the zero knowledge proofs that Zcash uses are extremely advanced, that Zcash, that it fell behind Monero, both in per coin value and then in total market cap. I mean, it's been, I guess, a year now, maybe, that Monero overtook it, just from being entirely private by default, but rather coin price, not total market cap. But But Monero has been sort of in the first place as privacy coins for some time now. I think largely because of what you're saying there. Just a hunch.
So, yeah, and then also something else that Tim mentioned right there resonated with me. And what was it that I wanted to say? So because of the hyperinflation of the dollar, because they're going to be giving people a universal basic income, right, in the US, or at least that's what Congress is proposing right now, I think there are a lot of people holding crypto assets who think that they may be getting rich in the near future, in the next few months or years, or, however long that takes. What advice can you give to people for how they can prepare to be rich so that they can maintain that wealth? Because, lottery winners are often likely to lose that money within 5 or 10 years. So what can people do to prepare themselves for wealth?
Well, I mean, in these types of times right now, I think it's even more important to make sure you've got, just the basic necessities, because it doesn't matter if you've got, $1 bajillion and you don't have food, water, shelter, there's riots outside of your house and you don't have, guns to defend yourself. So, I mean, just the absolute bare bones basics is, first what you want to be able to do, because if you're living in the inner city right now and you're, even in a nice place, and all of a sudden there's riots outside of your house and the average person is, starving and can't get food, then you should have your own plan. So that's just, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the very basic. But let's say, all of a sudden you are worth, a whole bunch of money. And maybe it even makes sense for me to kind of back up and tell my story of how I got into the crypto space and how I started working into this. Cause I know
please. I mean, you're a highly credentialed or qualified person. And I know you mentioned you're uncomfortable saying it, but let us toot your horn for you, man. Let us say that for you. You're a highly qualified person in terms of understanding so many facets of this space. It's not a traditional path, right? Not a traditional path for a CFP to say, you know what, I'm going to specialize in liberty-oriented causes and further cryptocurrency. This is unique.
Yeah, no, and you get a lot of the arrows in your back when you're the first guy doing something. And so basically my journey to all this is I was, probably, like I mentioned, I was, started my career the day Lehman Brothers crashed. What a great time to get into the financial business. I originally wanted to become a stock analyst, but graduating in 2008, that was basically impossible. So I joke, I'm like, yeah, I had a better chance of becoming like a Hawaiian Tropics bikini model than trying to become like a stockbroker or stock analyst at that point. And so at the time I was running my school's student managed investment fund. I moved everything to cash in November 2007. Got laughed at by everybody. No one was happy with me. And then was also in a class from my class. I was, full disclosure, I was not actually on the team because I thought they're all a bunch of nerds and I didn't really care about being in this. But my classmates won the national competition on the Federal Reserve against Harvard, Yale, and MIT. So, and our saying was actually, "In Fed we trust." And then one day I run into this guy who, one day I run it, and I was never told it was private. And one day I run into this guy, it looks like Rob Zombie, the heavy metal singer. It wasn't Rob. The guy just looked like him. And he's telling me the Fed's private. And I'm like, dude, no way. There's no way it's private. I'm like, I've got a Series 7, 66. I'm on track to be like probably the youngest person in the country with a certified financial planner designation at the time. All these different credentials. I was on the class that won the national competition on it. I think I know more than you. Like, you're just some painter that looks like Rob Zombie.
But then this Rob Zombie dude red pills you. He just steps up to you and like shoves it down your throat.
Well, but then he's like, hey, check out this documentary, Freedom to Fascism. Check out Ron Paul. So I checked out Freedom to Fascism, which is like crazy because one of my recent interviews was actually with Cherry Peel Jackson, who was like one of the main stars of that. So it's kind of weird that now I'm on stage like next to her at Anarchapulco. So that was kind of weird. And so then I watched that, and then my future ex-wife now bought me the book Creature from Jekyll Island, and I didn't even know that book even existed, and that's like the Bible of all this stuff, and that's what I started with. And then so I read that book, which highly recommend that. Unless you've got a significant other that isn't into this stuff, then it's probably not going to be good for you because you're going to get red pilled pretty quickly using this book. So then I read that, then realized, holy crap! Like, if I didn't know that was private, and I was in the class that won this competition, I had like one of the youngest people to get the CFP and had all these different credentials. I'm like, then who the hell else is going to know this stuff? And for people at home, like, this right now, I'm talking about like 2009, 2010, when this was not nearly as prevalent. because now there's a lot of people that know that the Fed's private, whereas in 2009 it wasn't necessarily like common knowledge. Before people were walking around with smartphones.
Because he actually wrote the book Audit the Fed, right? I mean, it wasn't just a movement case.
It was 2008.
Well, the book was End the Fed, not Audit the Fed.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. The movement after that point was Audit the Fed. Everybody wanted to audit it at least. So it's funny. There were, for those of us who were kind of already having our hearts and minds changed at around that time, or by Ron Paul and sort of the Liberty movement there, everything you're talking about sort of felt like a natural outgrowth. And all the stuff moves way slower than you want it to, right? Like you take the red pill and you're like, this is molasses in January. We're never going to see anything happen. Like nothing's moving at all. So at that point,
well, it's moving now. So.
Yeah, right. And here you are, man. You're at the vanguard of this, and you're positioned, of course, to really help people where it matters, right, in a very personal way. So from that point, you got red pilled. You started reading. The Rob Zombie dude was your Morpheus or whatever, and here you are. What do you do now to help the average Joe and Jane to understand, make sense of the world around them, and not be suckered by some of the financial products that they're being offered by their banks and other institutions?
Yeah, and I'll have to, after the show, I can't remember what the website is. It's on my own website, but if you go to TheLibertyAdvisor.com, there actually is like a crypto spot where if you're interested if you're an early adopter, you can get certain information. And if you or let's say you're crypto rich, there's like a section for you. If you like kind of want to get crypto rich, there's another section for you. And there's a whole bunch of different like literature. I haven't looked at that in like a month. But one of them is it talks about different scams and things to watch out for. And it kind of gets into who the founders are, is there what their background is, how much community development there is, was there a pre-mine. Is there some sort of like a bunch of hype men, like the BitConnect, type people that are out there? Because, there's, kind of right ways to do things and wrong ways to do things. You mentioned Zcash. I believe they had, I think they've got something where like the founders get something like 20% of all the mining rewards. I don't know if that's still true right now, but it was something like that.
It was a large amount. Zuko Wilcox primarily was the primary recipient of the founders reward. It wasn't just a governance fund. It was one dude. To your point.
Even better. So, and there's all these different, warning signs that are out there, and people that just want to get on the next, quote unquote Bitcoin to make a bunch of money. And these people that don't understand the difference between price and market cap, and they think, oh, well, Ripple's 20 cents and Bitcoin's $9,500. Therefore, if Ripple is only $10, we'd all be. I mean, I actually made a video January 3rd, 2018 saying, and it was like 3 minutes long, and I got into kind of the scammy parts of Ripple, and at the end of it, I was like, if you're buying Ripple at $3.40, I hope you lose all your effing money, because there's no way it's going to 10. And I mean, at the time, they're like, okay, great, we're worth $1 trillion. I mean, what's going to make it worth $1 trillion? And there's other reasons why I think that's sort of scammy. But if you've already made a bunch of money, so I guess this kind of answers both your questions, but also gets into like the history of how I got into this. And so, at the time, I thought that Bitcoin could be sort of like a mark of the beast, which, it could be. I mean, it's on a blockchain that could track, trace, surveil. So I sort of outsmarted myself and didn't get in, super early, even though I knew about it super early. And then this guy earned his hand, kind of skip it through here. So the guy who created the Ron Paul Revolution logo had the first Ron Paul meetup group at his house. His name Ernest Hancock. And so Ernie was at a pool party at his place, and he's like, hey, we got a bunch of rich crypto guys here. I'm coming to you, as the financial advisor, to let us know like how they can get their money from basically the digital world to the real world without getting killed on taxes. And so if you have like 7-figure type gains, and there are people listening to me right now like, oh, screw taxes. And yeah, I'm sort of like that too. But, but the thing is, if you have a bunch of money and you want to get it into the economy, they're going to know like, oh, where'd you get that $2 million from? Like, you're not going to be able to hide that.
Right.
And so...
and that they love to make examples of people like that, right? I mean, what was it? Al Capone, right? They didn't catch him on racketeering. They didn't catch him on any of the other felonious charges that of stuff that he was known to do. It was tax evasion, right?
Yeah, and when I gave an interview for Bitcoin.com, that's the exact example that I used was Al Capone, and that's where they ended up getting him on. And so, but you can do legal strategies, and this is more like 7-figure type stuff. So, don't come call me up and say, "Hey, I've got 10,000 Bitcoin, and I'm looking to get out of this because it's not going to work for you." But I don't know, maybe I guess it'd be one Bitcoin, but maybe if one Bitcoin that's being worth like $5 million, and then you can come talk to me. But what this is doing is you can take your Bitcoin, put it into a special type of trust. You then bypass all capital gains. You get tax deductions on top of the capital gains. You then get to pay yourself an income from the charitable trust that gets paid to you. Now, the catch is upon your death, that then goes to a charity, but it can be your own charity to do good for the world of whatever you want to do. But then you use the fact that you're saving, essentially you're saving $238,000 per $1 million of gains, and tax deductions on top of that, and then you use some of those tax deductions to buy life insurance. You put that to a special type of trust, then bypass, so that way that passes outside of the estate tax. And now this is like level 500 financial planning, where now your family gets a tax-free death benefit from the life insurance. You get to bypass all capital gains. Those gains that you pay, those income that you pay yourself, and helped offset by the tax deduction, and it's level 500 financial plan. And that's one side of what I was doing that I figured out. Then the other side of what I was doing that I figured out was, okay, well, people started asking about crypto IRAs. And again, this is September of 2017 too. So this is like right before the jump off. And at the time, I had no idea how to do it. I started researching how to do it. I went to a conference that had nothing to do with Bitcoin. And this guy, I found out, specialized in self-directed IRAs. You can do more advanced things inside of your retirement accounts. So he had an RIA, a registered advisory, that specialized in self-directed IRAs. So I'm like, that's even like a thing. Like you get an RIA that specializes in self-directed IRAs. I mean, try saying that 10 times fast. And he ends up, peppering me with these questions because he's like, hey, this is super difficult. Like, you're some young kid, like, no way you've got this somewhat figured out. And then I knew the answers to most questions. I did not want to have to leave the company I was at, because I had just left another company, and I built up my own independent practice at the age, I think I left at like 28. So I'm like, I don't know, about like 30 years old, had built up my own company, finally was, doing well. And then, the game plan was to have, if you were already crypto rich, you could use these advanced financial planning strategies to, make yourself better off. If you wanted to use retirement assets to be able to invest in the crypto, where you hold the private keys, that's very important. You hold the private keys in these structures. And then I figured out how to do that. Then right as I've got this figured out, then the price of Bitcoin just goes through the roof. And the company I was with banned every advisor in America from talking about Bitcoin, thinking about Bitcoin, recommending Bitcoin. And I wasn't even, then I was set to speak at Acapulco. This is 3 years ago, and to tell people how they could sell their Bitcoin into these trusts at the top, mind you. And no one listened to me, unfortunately. So I didn't get any clients out of that whole deal, because everyone was thinking it was going to go to $1 bajillion at the time. Yeah. So they
moon fever across the industry. They just couldn't
yeah. So then. Yeah, so then I literally, in order for me to speak at Acapulco, I had to step away from a 6-figure residual income that I had already built up, then pay a gigantic fine for breaking a 3-year contract 1 year early. Then the state of Arizona wouldn't then allow me to work and wouldn't approve my paperwork to become the same job I was already doing, but doing it so with, I guess, long story short, I ended up backing things up. I ended up then deciding to part with that guy who I met at the conference, who had specialized in self-directed IRAs, because they knew the deal, and they knew what I was about, and they knew they liked what I had to say and what I was offering. So I teamed up with them, but then literally the government of Arizona wouldn't allow me to work, which I guess, doesn't sound so crazy now, because they're not allowing anybody to work. I guess now they are, but
all things considered, the context, right? You were part of the witch hunt at that time. Yeah.
And it's crazy that, like, I was at the time, like, decided, okay, I'm going to give up my office. I'm going to I didn't have any money at that point, so I had to give up my office. But then I'm like, I'm going to start using Zoom meetings and becoming a virtual financial advisor. And this was like 3 years ago. So I had already, like, so now, like, this whole entire coronavirus thing fell into my lap, because I was already had a virtual practice, was already working from home, already had most of my clients coming from across the country, was already using Zoom. So now it's great, because I don't have to explain to anybody what Zoom is anymore. So that's awesome. Yeah. And so it's this weird dichotomy. I had to take the hit like 3 years ago, whereas now everybody else is taking the hit, and I'm doing better now, with everybody else is screwed. So it's kind of weird how like the world ends up like coming back around to where I was at. But but it sucked big time having to do what I didn't have to do. I could have easily just stayed doing what I was doing, but I was like, I'm not 5 years old. I mean, I should be able to give people financial advice that they need. And so there are super advanced strategies that you can use if you've made a bunch of money in crypto. And if you've got retirement accounts, because people were saying like, hey, let's just take $100,000 out of my retirement and buy Bitcoin. Well, if you do that, and I've got the math actually on my website, so I'm just kind of going off memory right now. But I believe if you had $100,000 that you took out of your 401k January 1st, 2017, a year later, you would have had about, again, past performances and future returns, blah, 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 blah. No one has, this is just that hypothetical example. A year later, you would have had about $890,000. And this would have been outside of your 401k. And so it would have been a pretty good bet. But if but you had to pay taxes on that $100,000, and then technically any gain that would have gone up, and they would directly withhold your taxes too when you go to take money out of a 401k or an IRA. So then the other example is, okay, well, if you're already going to pay taxes, you could convert your IRA or 401k to a Roth IRA. You're already paying taxes, but now you get yourself out of a 10% penalty. So you're giving the government 10% less money. And then a year later, you would have had, in that example, instead of having $890,000, you would have had $1.03 million, but that would have been a tax-free gain. And the other thing people would bust my balls about are like, well, hey, why don't, the government, it's in a 401k, so the government can just take it. Well, you have the private keys. So, I mean, what is the government going to take? So,
right. Well, I mean, here's what the anarchists, we're hearing the anarchists come out where it's like, yeah, you can sort of watch what we're doing, but you don't get custody. This is awesome.
No, I mean, technically the alternative asset custodian has custody of the LLC, then the LLC then owns there's a whole bunch of steps to doing this.
Sure.
It's very, very...
Pardon the interruption, man, because this is phenomenal, and I know that you've got a fairly short amount of time, but it sounds like the author of The Power of Zero, like had a baby with Andreas Antonopoulos, and then they cloned it, and that's you. Like, bro, you mentioned level 500 financial planning, and have to agree wholeheartedly. This is phenomenal. You're blowing my mind with everything you're saying here, because clearly you've come up with the structures that go far beyond checkbook LLCs and that are owned by these other corporations. Like, clearly there's a system that if people want to not get wrecked on taxes and not get wrecked by the SEC, that they have to be aware of. But it's like a minefield, and clearly you've been able to manage this repeatedly, right? Like by gaining, and then you mentioned taking a lot of arrows, man. In a post-coronavirus world, like, can you build up an immunity to getting arrows in your back? Because if anybody knows, I think it's you.
I am also a 7-time Ironman triathlete too, so I'm getting the arrows thrown at me. But yeah, it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. And now I'm in a position where I'm even stronger than I was before, and have a practice that I can, all my clients now are basically hardcore libertarians that I can speak my mind and do things like these podcasts and make jokes like lizard people, because all my clients, I've already offended all the clients who've already left, because they, 2000, I literally lost two of my biggest clients when I did this whole move, because one's like, oh, hey, I was listening to you here and you're way too negative on Trump. And then literally like a couple days later, my next biggest client's like, oh, hey, I listened to this and you were way too positive on Trump. And I'm like, great. So I literally lost two of my biggest clients for being both too positive and too negative on the same guy. And
how dare you think,
but you know what? Now I don't need to worry about that. Yeah. So now I don't need to worry about that, because and let's just talk about the traditional financial performance. I kicked the crap out of everybody the past 2 years. So I was first on video talking about this October 3rd, 2018. So I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking this. And I'm like, listen, the market's either going to keep going way the hell higher because of all this Fed money printing and all this irrational exuberance, or it's going to crash down to the ground. So what I did was, okay, I talked about this on video ahead of time. And I even put it on YouTube on my presentation I gave at Acapulco. I uploaded it February 20th, which was the day after one day away from the all-time high in the stock market, where I gave a little 2-minute commercial I made in my GoPro at the end of this video talking about this strategy as well. And long story short, that strategy at the worst of all this downturn, without doing any trading at all, I was down 5%, but I went up 26% the year before in traditional markets. So even all these other regular financial advisors, I kicked the shit out of what they were doing. So sorry, I don't know if I can swear. Then
The show is not regulated by the FCC. You're good.
Yeah, I like murdered them in their own game, and then I also was like murdering them in the other game that I don't even know about. And so it was just crazy because what I did was I bought put options on the S&P 500 January 15th. That some of them at one point were up like 700%. And then also was long the S&P 500. So it was a strategy where I was betting on lots of volatility. And this is not a strategy you always want to run all the time. I'm actually not running it right now. So truth be told. So, but we're running it for about 2 years. And so when the market went way up, we got almost all the gains. And then when it went way down, we got almost none of the losses. And so it was perfect. So in 1 year we got, we went up 26. The other year we were only down like 5. And that includes my fee, or else it would have been like, closer to like 3.5. This is across the board. So our clients are not all, this is like approximate because not everybody has the exact same portfolio. And some people got in at different prices, and some people have more gold or Bitcoin than others. And some people, in terms of traditional assets.
While you're chatting, I'm going to run the title card right now, just reminding people none of this big red flag. None of this is financial advice.
Not financial advice.
You come talk to me if you want the financial advice. So
so the examples that you're giving, just to say that you're saying past performance is not necessarily, there's no promises being made here at all. With what Tim is saying, guys, he's just letting you know what he's capable of. But
if you're with a guy right now that you have that you don't know his name, and he's just telling you to always be in the stock market, and it's always good, and the best time to invest was yesterday, and he's making fun of you for being into crypto. He's out on the golf course all day long, when there's not coronavirus pandemic going on. But, I would say, and even right now, I'm so busy right now that I'm like, basically there's like a wait list to even have people throw their money at me right now. There's one other guy who we're looking at bringing on right now to help me out. And I've got actually other people at my firm help me out too, but we've got another former investment advisor who then in 2013, he kind of pioneered being able to bet, gamble using Bitcoin on video games. And then he left the investment advisory world to do that. And now we're looking at bringing him back because everyone that's over here, they're also, libertarians. And like literally my assistant, by complete coincidence, grew up in the same home. Like his dad bought, so the house that he grew up in, my assistant, his father bought their home from the LaCava family. And if you know anything about it, it's Lynn LaCava Albrecht. So Ross Albrecht's grandpa,
oh my gosh,
owned the home to my assistant's childhood home.
What a small world. Good grief. Yeah. Well, and culture is everything, as you know. Within a company, culture is everything. Having a good fit, camaraderie, making sure that you don't have to explain the ideological reasons for pursuing a specific policy that maybe you implement SOPs, and maybe they don't even have to be SOPs, right? Because you've got a cultural fit. People just kind of get it. That makes so much sense that you'd want to work with people this way. And again, thank you so much for carving out the time. We don't want to overstay our welcome because we know you've got a lot of people's financial interests to attend to. And this is phenomenal education for our audience. So thank you for diversifying your time between yours and ours. Hopefully this helps grow your audience, and vice versa, because we know that we're not qualified to give anything resembling advice, whether the cameras are rolling or not. But that we love hearing from people who actually are. So this is great that you're so.
Thank you for having me. Actually, I do have a BitChute channel where it's dedicated just to crypto, where I've got like probably 40, 50 crypto videos on there that you guys can find. And one of them actually is where I interview a guy who is Dr. Daniel Kim, who I think he has a PhD from Yale and like a Harvard MBA, and this Asian guy dressed up in a suit and Acapulco, and they got myself as a CFP, and we're both talking about the use cases and legitimate merits of Monero. So it's posted, which had like 1,000 views on BitChute, which is like like 1 billion views on YouTube.
You're right. It's all relative on all platforms.
Yeah, I know. So, I would recommend people check that one out. I mean, if this is a crypto show, all the crypto videos I've posted, I probably have 40, 50 of them. And, I do have, some access to some higher level people just because of, some people that I've seen in the space. And, but yeah, no, I appreciate, being on your show, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. what is your time like right now for maybe some additional follow-up questions with regards to helping people avoid getting wrecked? Because you mentioned you have the guide, and I think that Nicole, you spoke with Tim earlier. That's how you formed that other document, right?
Yeah. Tim and I've done some contract work with Tim, and I created this list that we usually run down, identifying a scam for, potentially identifying a scam in crypto.
Okay, and it feels like it's almost out of place because, gosh, like Tim, people might not know it. People who haven't picked up what you were talking about by way of being able to reorient their thinking from just 401k to like to a Roth IRA or some kind of like a Roth structure, and then building up, just understanding that there are systems that they can go to a certified professional like yourself to then implement so that they stand a much better chance of at least doing no harm by being involved in crypto, and then potentially actually preserving wealth and growing wealth through the guidance of a professional like yourself. Most people, I think, if they're not already in that space, they don't know how much alpha you've just given them just by planting that idea into their head that they don't have to do what everybody else is doing like idiots and get wrecked. So that alone is great. Thank you.
Most of the time, if you're looking around and everyone is doing the same thing you're doing, then you're probably doing the wrong thing. Because the average person is, and this is the average person is not listening to this podcast because they're out watching Rachel Maddow or something. But and actually yesterday I was doing a live stream with Josh Segerson, and I went on Twitter, which I never go on there, and I typed in protest, and the very first thing that popped up was Rachel Maddow interviewing a CIA agent talking about Trump. Is like literally the first, and then you go on YouTube live, and we typed in, I don't know what city we're in, like Milwaukee. You couldn't find a single, there wasn't it showed just zero. And so you go live, like under the filter, Milwaukee protest or Milwaukee riot or Minneapolis, and it was just zero. Like, oh yeah, there's no one in New York City riot. Oh, there's nobody live streaming in New York City right now. I find that awfully hard to believe. And so that's another thing that, the more they push back, there's going to be different types of, internet structures where they're not going to be able to stop the information in the future. I mean, the power structure is going to stop the traditional internet, in my opinion, at some point, and have different blackouts and jam people's phones and do things like that. But there's going to be other things coming down the pipeline where blockchain can be used to help free. And so, my main role is just trying to, because it's more than just, making a bunch of money or saving a bunch of money. It's, literally, if we don't get this right in the next 5 years, your kids and grandkids are going to be enslaved, or you might not even get to the point where you're having grandkids because, literally in the UK right now, they just made it illegal to have sex with people outside of your household right now. That's not even, like, literally not even a joke right now. I mean, that the UK has made it illegal to have sex outside of your household. I mean, you can't even make this up. And then
I love how oddly specific that is too. It's like, so are you saying that I like you're recommending inbreeding? This is what we're actually saying. This is law. Like,
and someone from Kentucky or West Virginia make that law. I don't know. Sorry, I just lost all the potential Kentucky clients.
I don't know. That specific law has had me kind of dumbfounded too, and had me wondering, Chris Rice Crypto's presupposition has been from the beginning of this pandemic that this was a takeover by religious, Amish authorities to try and make us, fear technology. And that was the all of the anti-5G that came along with this. But additionally, now this reminded me of that too. You can't have sex with someone outside of your house. I never interpreted it as, encouraging incest. I interpreted that as if you're not, married or living with your partner, you're not legally allowed to have sex. And that really does fit that narrative that Rice has been.
Sure. I think it's kind of funny. I think there are a lot of directions that you can take some of these initiatives. And if you want to start looking at potential like power structures, hidden power structures, et cetera, and what they want, I don't know that it's necessarily a religious, I don't know that it's necessarily a religious thing or even a faith-based thing. Cause you had Richard Hart, for example, at a crypto conference in Scandinavia about a year ago.
What's a religion? That's a religion of government. Is the religion statism? Yeah, that's the religion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And go to Scandinavia too, and they've got such a problem with statism there, and being so in love with statism, being told what to do, and they don't really have something that resembles some of like what we enjoy here. I'm just going to say First Amendment rights, to make it not about religion, but just believing what you want to believe, and there, like here in the United States, because we have our First Amendment rights preserved. you do have some
allegedly,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Until you try going to an actual real protest, or you like in 2012 when I was going to Ron Paul stuff, and I was out here in Phoenix where there was some what they had, like one of the last debates was out here in Phoenix, and I went down there and they tried to push. There was thousands of people there for Ron Paul, like 20 people there for Mitt Romney, like 2 people there for Newt Gingrich, and they literally had police with guns say, "You guys get into free speech zones," and snipers on the roof, forcing us to get in the free speech zones. We had a sign that says "End the Fed," or so just peacefully, not even protesting, not rioting, not burning things down.
Yeah,
just literally there trying to support Ron Paul. And in 2012, putting people in the free speech zones, or you get like all the Bundy Ranch stuff where they said, okay, if you want to protest, this is a little cordoned off area that you get for free speech zones. And it's actually codified in the law that 100 miles in from the border is actually a Constitution free zone. And so the Constitution technically doesn't apply within 100 miles of the border. I mean, this is something that I believe George W. Bush signed. And so you can go look it up right now. I mean, most of the USA population is within 100 miles of the border because they're all, on coastal towns, or, even if you're living like upstate New York where I'm from, you're technically 100 miles within Canada if you, were to go north across the water over there. So
that's crazy. That's crazy because in 2012, I mean, in Austin, the Ron Paul super PAC was great. It was fine. We weren't interfered with there. We had no problems at all. But just to jump back to that initial thread starter there, when you compare the United States to countries within Scandinavia, you wind up having, because of the tradition of the First Amendment, we'll say, the idea of the First Amendment. Because right now, implementation, so much is broken right now. Nobody, and I don't think anybody on this live stream disagrees that there's so much that's broken right now, fundamentally. And ironically, the way to fix it is to just like slash and burn some of it, right? And then start from scratch, some of it.
Well, we talked about, audit the Fed. Well, for me, first it became audit the Fed, then it was ignore the Fed. Sorry, then eventually it was ignore the Fed, but it was audit the Fed, then it was end the Fed. And then I was like, you know what? They're just going to burn down their own system. I don't need to waste my energy trying to end them. They're going to end themselves. This is already the third version of the Federal Reserve there's been in the country. Technically, it was the first central bank of America that ended in 1812, and the British openly owned it, came here, burned down the White House. Second central bank, Andrew Jackson got rid of. He was attempted to be assassinated twice, and both guns misfired. And the guy said it was wealthy Europeans that put him up to it. And that's a whole bunch. Yeah, it's a whole other big rabbit hole. And then this is the third one. And so now I'm like, well, you know what? You can promote crypto, promote decentralization. They're going to end themselves. And the more they mess things up and F things up, then probably the higher the price of crypto goes. And so, you can, I'm not saying ignore it from like a tax standpoint in case the SEC is listening to this, but ignore it from you guys are already going to burn down your own house. I don't need to go focus on any energy wasted. So it was a transition from, if we just audit them, and as a idealist, 24-year-old, we all we need is audit them. We're going to expose how corrupt they are. Well, I don't trust any audit they do anyways. Sure. We investigated ourselves and found out that we're innocent. And then end the Fed. Then we're just going to get blamed for whatever happens. And then so now I think ignoring the Fed and just creating a whole system that's outside of whatever they can control, because they can't stop Bitcoin, they can't stop crypto. I mean, what are they going to? And every single thing they could use to stop it, would probably end up making it stronger, or else they just waste a bunch of money. Because I know Andreas and Antonopoulos has talked a lot about different attack vectors that they could do and different ways around that. And so,
well, let's talk about that
are always like,
also.
Have you thought of this?
Yeah. But to your point, then, just as long as we just don't interrupt the Fed while they continue to make mistakes, right? They'll make enough mistakes that like a game of chess, right? We're probably not going to win with some power stroke, right? Or some power move. It's just going to be enough mistakes on their part, and then we'll checkmate them eventually. That makes a lot of sense.
Oh, we just vote harder. We just vote harder. We just vote for the right guy, and then we'll get
right.
We'll get the first.
Yeah, right. Wake up your dead grandpa. Get him to vote. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what the Dems want. Yeah,
I've got the price of Bitcoin that's like permanently out, like on my desktop right here. So I'm just keep looking at it right now. But it's 9,500 right now. But awesome. I mean, it's just.
Let's talk a little bit about derivatives. I mean, what do you as far as an attack vector on Bitcoin, derivatives, futures? My stance, and this is me being not qualified to give advice, and my limited understanding of it from a macro view. But as I understand it, derivatives and futures, this is like the injection site of poison for Bitcoin, because you're able to use something that is easily manipulated and printed and fabricated to then control the market of something that should be finite, scarce, and mathematically fair.
I mean, this kind of gets back to what we talked about initially and what the whole like premise of the show was risk tolerance. And so great if they manipulate it and cause it to go down 80%. And if your intuition isn't to go buy more of it, then you shouldn't be in it in the first place. And so, okay, great. They F with it and make it absolutely crash. Well, good. Your $100 a month that you put in, now you can buy more. And so great. They're manipulating things. Well, use it to your advantage. And it can be, and they don't even really need the futures to manipulate it. I mean, Bitcoin is such a small asset class relative to the financial system. It's teeny. It's like a drop in the bucket, drop it in the ocean maybe. And so it doesn't take, the power structure to have to dump too much Bitcoin at once to just tank everything and then create like this, self-fulfilling prophecy from that. But great, when they do that, go buy more of it. I mean, not financial advice, but hypothetically, if you are into it and you aren't panicking, you don't need the money. But guess what? If you need the money, 100% of your stuff in the Bitcoin, and you need certain living expenses, and then you all of a sudden you need to go sell out, and your Bitcoin's worth 500% less than it was before. Well, then now you're going to be in some trouble. So have and that's something called sequence of return risk, where it doesn't really matter what your average return is. It matters more what your order of returns are. And so let's say you raised a bunch of money in Ethereum, and Ethereum $100, and now you've got, now you're sitting at $10 million, and Ethereum goes down, and now you're, I don't know what the exact math on that is, and now you're sitting on, $1 million, and your expenses are $500,000 a year. Well, then boom, you just wiped out, half of your, entire raise because you had a bad sequence of returns. So it doesn't matter if Ethereum ends up going up, hypothetically going up, 100% a year. If year one it's down 90%, and then you had to go sell all of your Ethereum from an ICO raise. And so, I literally own sequenceofreturnrisk.com that I bought several years ago just to highlight the fact that there's a big risk, and that's the pensions are also going to face a massive return because, as these pensions now start pulling out funds for people to actually live off of, now that baby boomers are old enough to start taking funds. In 2008, the oldest baby boomer was only 62, whereas now it's 12 years later, and so now they're 74. They're pulling money out, and so pension funds don't have time to recover, which is why the Federal Reserve is going and buying junk bonds of all things. And if there's one video that people want to watch, is the Anarchapulco speech that I gave February. It's on my YouTube channel. It's under presentations. We're literally 10 days before the crash. I was out there talking about how the corporate bond market was going to be like the major kind of black swan that kicks off, because you're going to see about half of the 30 to 50% of those corporate bonds that are investment grade are going to be downgraded to junk. Then the junk bonds, a lot of them are going to be downgraded to, are going to default. And then these ETFs, now exchange traded funds, they're forced to hold on to a certain amount of bond, a certain grade of bonds. And now if you're mandated to hold on to an investment grade bond, and now you've got a junk bond, now you're forced to sell, which is going to create even more forced selling, and it's going to become a snowball that's actually going to devastate the entire system, because these companies are cash poor because they used all their cash to have stock buybacks. Again, this is February 11th that I was out there on stage talking about this. And then and so now what the Fed did is they came in and actually started buying up junk bond ETFs. And in some cases, the broker for that was BlackRock. In some cases, BlackRock literally got to sell their own funds, make a commission off of it, sell it to the Federal Reserve. And then now the Federal Reserve literally owns like a fleet of rental cars from Hertz. Now that they own Hertz bonds that have defaulted. And so not only did they even buy them, they bought them and they told everybody that they're going to buy them. So then they bid up the prices on them, but all their friends at Wall Street sell them at higher prices. And so now it was a complete get jail free card for all these fund managers who were investing into a bunch of risky shit that they shouldn't have been investing in, and they should have got their asses handed to them. But instead they got bailed out at 100 cents on the dollar, didn't even have to take any haircut. And that's the real looting, not the looting that just went on with all, not that I condone all the, the Antifa rioters and antagonists and agent provocateurs, but
sure. Well, hey, we've got context, man. We know you're not trying to make cast aspersions or slight anybody who's suffering right now. But yeah, totally. There's been white collar crime, the worst possible type that rivals the pain that people are experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're after 11, and I know that you have another appointment today, Tim. Is that right?
Okay. Yeah, actually, that was yesterday. But no, I am good. But Yeah, I mean, if people do want to, if you have a couple more questions, I'll be happy to stay on for a few more questions. Nicole's done a lot of work with me; has helped me out a lot. We were doing videos for a while, but then I got so busy with everything going on in my life, and moved, and had and also I just hated being stuck in the political BS constantly, because at the end of the day, focusing on, oh, this news story happened, this news story happened, this news story happened. Well, if you take a higher 100,000-foot view, none of those stories even matter. Everything is eventually going to be burned to the ground because of the Federal Reserve, and which will probably bode well for crypto.
Yeah.
And spreading the word on crypto is spreading the word on crypto. If you want to, end the government or end the state, they're going to end themselves. I mean, I don't need to go and end them.
Sure.
Promoting Bitcoin is, I think, the most efficient way to eventually end the Federal Reserve. So, or at least checkmate them, because there's certain things that they probably have held off from doing just because there is Bitcoin. There are alternatives. So
Well, I'd love to sit down our is it a scam checklist and see if there's anything that you think that we should add or subtract. Do you have it up, Seth?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, Tim, to your generous offer from, or what you were mentioning before by way of videos, if you're open to it, and if you can carve out schedule sometime in the future, we'd love to have you back on for a couple of additional engagements.
Yeah, Nicole's helped me out a lot, so yeah, I would I'd be fine with that.
All right, so what's the first thing on our crypto checklist? It's not the multi-level marketing. It's what is it? Do you know what it is, Seth?
So the very first thing is bombastic claims.
Oh yeah, do they make bombastic claims? Yeah. So yeah, that was one. Yeah, they promised high returns. And the second thing is it tiered like a multi-level marketing? Is there a tiered referral system?
And also say, anytime they talk about guarantees, you invest into this and you put $100 into this, it's going to be, $2 million, and just all of these bombastic claims that you're talking about. I mean, that's a complete red flag. I mean, I respect founders who, didn't go through ICOs, that just, launched their product out there, didn't have pre-mine, and, don't talk about price. And just talk about price in general, should be just a red flag in and of itself, because you should be talking about how you're going to change the world, what use cases you have, and not, oh, you invest into this and you're going to, and just by saying the word invest, I mean, you're almost then turning it into a security as well. I mean, and Jay Clayton, the head of the SEC, has said every ICO he's seen is a security too. So, just be super leery of anybody that's going to make any guarantees or try to say you're definitely going to make a bunch of money doing something.
Okay. So then we've got a tiered referral system, meaning does it look like a multi-level marketing or a pyramid? So the people, make a commission off of the people who you get to sign up. And then the third point, what is it? Sorry, I don't have it up.
Yeah, no worries. So the third point is, can it be traded on exchanges? And I think also which ones? Yeah.
Or used. Real utility. Is the product, already usable somewhere? Is there a way to spend your tokens? What's next?
So the next one is it legal in the USA and similar territories? Why or why not?
Right. Yep. Then,
do real experts endorse it? So people who are qualified, people who have credentials, people who have a history and background in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people that have credentials, I mean, I would say that not even super important, or you get different newsletter guys who are trying to hype different stuff. But, look at some like the OGs in the space. I mean, people like, Andreas Antonopoulos and people like that, not people that are just claiming to be experts. Because I'm not claiming to be a crypto expert, but I mean, I probably know more than 99.9% of people in the world on it. But nobody knows everything about everything in the crypto space, because there's just too many facets of it. But I see a lot of people are like, oh, look at all the money I made in late 2017. Okay, great. He could have made money in late 2017, but how much do you hold on to it? So
yeah. Hashtag XRP Army. Even they made money. Yeah, right. That's awesome. So next question is it marketed to the ignorant? And
right. Is the next thing, has the founder made any claims that have proven to be false?
Yeah, and actually, so in addition to that, who is the founder? Who's the founding team? Who's on the team? Do any of the people for example, do they have anybody listed on the team who's not just anonymous, but who's clearly fake, right? Like a sock puppet person. And then is there a functioning product? If it's some kind of a smart contract platform, or if it has some additional functionality like private messaging or VPN service or some additional value added public consumable product or consumer facing product or service, what is it? And does it work?
Yep. Is there a functioning blockchain?
I asked about products, and I changed it to product in particular because I've interviewed a lot of products that do what are called enhanced service nodes. So in addition to having some kind of a master node network that does 51% attack protection and validates transactions on the network, there are some coin networks that, in addition to having a blockchain that functions, they have a master node network that is supposed to offer some enhanced service. Right? So it may do DNS resolution for you, so you can have unstoppable domains, for example. It may have like IPFS, for example, do decentralized hosting of content, so you can have untakedownable content, like a blog that is from top to bottom, from DNS to the hosting, that everything is completely untakedownable. You just have a hash that corresponds to your content. And so if that's on their roadmap, do they have something today, something to show for it? And if not, when will they? Then the next one is just checking GitHub for activity. Is there activity? If so, is it relevant? Because
right, and then verifying the smart contract.
Yes.
On either side or whatever blockchain. And so those were our tips for just evaluating whether a project is, or not. Do you have anything that you would add, or
that seemed like a pretty good list. I do have on my website. There's one. I have top 10 most common questions investors have, and are things that people should know before they get into crypto space. And I think there was a lot of overlap. I was trying to pull it up. I couldn't find the actual where I have it saved in my computer quickly, but lots of scams to be made out there. Lots of whenever there's a place to make money, there's people who are trying to, figure out a way to separate you and your money and, make it theirs. And so it's funny. Also, the IRS is the IRS theirs. Yeah. And so, there's always people who are going to be, scamming people, but it doesn't mean, crypto is a scam. Obviously, people are watching this probably, especially if you're this far deep into it now, you probably don't think that way. But yeah, just be careful. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And getting back to the original question is, if it went to zero, would you be able to stomach that? So, don't, put something on a flyer. Cause I talk to people getting into the space, and a lot of times they're not even in Bitcoin. It's like, oh, I'm in this, and it's some coin I've never heard of. Or unfortunately, a lot of times it's Ripple. I was at the pool the other day and overheard a guy being like, oh yeah, I put my $1,200 into cryptocurrencies. And I was like, oh really? And it actually turned out the guy was a pastor too. I'm like, oh, that's pretty awesome. So then I was talking with him. He's like, yeah, I put it into XRP. And I'm like, damn it. And I told him Monero. So here I am, but preaching to the preacher, why he shouldn't be. But just overhearing that conversation, and actually it was 2 days in a row I overheard people talking about Bitcoin at the pool. And somebody asked me, he's like, oh, what do you think of? Have you heard of Bitcoin? I'm like, have I heard of Bitcoin? I don't know how much you have, but unfortunately it's always rippled to all new people, and so it drives me nuts. And I'm guessing that this is probably a audience if you're wearing a Monero hat, but it's just, and all the founders hold on to 40% of the of the tokens that are out there, which I believe Ripple's something like that, or half of it. And so they have a certain market cap, but then they also have the fact that they have, or is there even a market cap? Can they just keep printing unlimited amounts of cryptocurrency? Maybe that should be on the list as well. And so there's, not to say that, it's automatically a bad thing, but, can the code be rewritten to, or is the code designed to say, okay, well, we have an infinite amount of currency and at any given time, we can just print more of it. I think that's also an important thing to consider as well.
Right. That's
the cap.
Yeah, I think that's why we asked told people to take a look at the GitHub. If you are capable of doing the code review, then that's a good thing to do. It can be tough for a lot of people to know how to audit certain code bases. for example, like the halving event that just happened with Bitcoin, most people wouldn't know where to look at the Bitcoin code base to see how that functions and to see when that takes place. I know that I don't possess that skill, right? So I'd have to look up a guide, and I'd have to kind of really educate myself just for that one task to go into the code base and see, all right, there are the lines of code within Bitcoin that show me that it halves on a schedule and that it'll experience a halving event every 4 years, and it'll be about this time on this block. There's a lot about that I think really escapes people. To your point, though, also with infinitely emitted coins, when the emission curve is not capped at all, there are projects like Ethereum, for example, that have no cap, but they're also highly useful, right? They have utility. So that's part of the design scope for a reason. They don't really intend to create scarcity with the supply. And so same with Monero. It's not capped. So I don't know if that's always like Nicole said with this list when we did the live stream, that any one of these points by itself shouldn't be like a non-starter.
I mean, like not knowing who the founder is. I mean, you could say, some people say that's a good thing. So for Bitcoin, I mean, nobody knows who Satoshi is, but it doesn't mean it's automatically a bad thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then same with that point of a capped emission. With some coin projects, that would definitely help to make the case for value because they've introduced scarcity in the code base. But then with other projects, most people don't know that there are some projects that absolutely could be altered. Bitcoin, for example, in the year 2140, if they decide that transactions only, rewarding transactions, the validation of transactions only isn't enough, we don't know what'll happen in 2140. It's entirely possible they will change it so that it emits an additional 21 million coins. That's always possible. It's not the code base itself is not entirely immutable. And the development team, they fought over SegWit, right? And then now they're fighting over Lightning, and Bitcoin Cash even divided into ABC and Bitcoin SV. So there's quite a lot that can come from contentious forks that was outlined in the Satoshi's white paper that can be resolved through hash rate and resolved through some other form of validation. But the code base, it's alive, man. It actually does evolve over time. So, but
yeah. Thanks so much, Tim, for being here. It was great to have you. We'd love to have you back sometime. Do you want to, Tim Picciott at TheLibertyAdvisor.com. What else do you want to promote?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys, I've got a podcast, and so that's where you guys can find all the different propaganda I'm putting out. I mean, a lot of it is more higher level economic, financial stuff, but then time and time again, I've had probably 50 different crypto episodes that I've put out, and now I'm doing some more like walk and talks with my dogs these days because I find that to be more enjoyable than just sitting down and being behind a green screen and all this other stuff talking. So I mean, you guys can find out my content there, and then there's videos to 99% of all that stuff. It's just I'm not on all the platforms because it's just a pain in the ass trying to upload to these different places. And BitChute, I mean, I've been trying to support them, but you know what? If you go and it takes 8 days to go upload something, you then got to go redo it. I don't have time for that. So, check out the podcast, and then and if you're interested in working with me, it'd be TheLibertyAdvisor.com. I am on a backlog right now of trying to work through getting to everybody, just because it's been sort of crazy over here because everyone. I was telling people a lot of this stuff in advance, and then they all wait till, the shit hits the fan. And then they all want to contact me when, they should have all done it before all that stuff happened. But, better late than never. And I appreciate any support or following people want to give.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, also, Crypto Nerd shirt is the shirt of the day. So you can pick that up on mineyear.biz.
Awesome. Yeah, Tim, again, we've got links to all of your web properties that are in the show notes here, and then we've been showing most of your website and your YouTube channel and everything else as a visual aid as
awesome.
We've been chatting today. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, we appreciate your time. Thank you. You've been so generous. You've been more generous than we could ask for, and your expertise is so needed. If anybody has watched the show to this point and just hasn't been able to pick up how much value Tim has just hinted at, or just given out liberally. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It's obvious. You got so much more that he has to give when you work with him.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.